Shanna, you see in the news all the time. A headline flashes across the screen. The Fed lowers interest rates again.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually followed by a lot of serious looking people on TV talking about bond yields and economic projections. And for most people watching at home, I think the reaction is, okay, so what?
Exactly. It feels like this big abstract event that happens in a boardroom somewhere far away. You hear that it's good news for savers, but bad for borrowers, and it doesn't seem to connect to our daily lives at all.
That's right. But the truth is, those decisions have a very real, direct impact on almost every dollar we earn, save, and borrow. And that's our goal today, is to help bridge that gap. So we're going to translate that very confusing headline into what it actually means for your wallet.
Welcome back to Making Sense of Your Sense. I'm Daniel Hill.
And I am Shanna Browning. And today, we're going to tackle a topic that's constantly in the news, but often misunderstood: the Federal Reserve, or the Fed.
Now, we're not going to get bogged down in complex economic theory. Instead, we're going to focus on the one thing that matters most to you. How do Fed decisions on interest rates affect your savings account, your credit cards, and your mortgage?
That's right, Daniel. And let's start with the absolute basics. When we say the Fed, we're not really talking about the FBI or some sort of crazy alphabet agency, right? Mm-mm. When we say the Fed, who are we actually talking about?
Well, Shanna, that's a good question. The Federal Reserve Bank, or the Fed, is the central bank of the United States. You can think of it as the banker's bank. It's an independent government agency, and its main job is to keep our country's financial system stable and healthy. And to do that, Congress has given them two primary goals, which is often called their dual mandate.
Ah, interesting. And so what are those two goals?
Well, the first is to promote maximum employment. They want the economy to be strong enough that everyone who wants to get a job can find one. And the second goal is to maintain stable prices, which really means keeping inflation under control.
Which are pretty big goals. Mm-hmm. And sometimes two goals can sometimes be at odds with each other, right?
They absolutely can. It's a constant balancing act. If the economy is running too hot, employment might be high, but inflation can get out of control, making everything more expensive. If they try to cool the economy down too much to fight inflation, it can risk slowing down job growth. To manage this balancing act, the Fed has a primary tool that you always hear about in the news. It's the ability to set a key interest rate.
Which is an interesting term. And the key interest rate is called the federal funds rate. And so tell me what that is.
So the federal funds rate is the interest rate that banks charge each other for overnight loans. Now, that sounds technical. But all you really need to know is that this one rate serves as the foundation for almost all other interest rates in the economy.
Okay, so when the Fed raises or lowers the federal funds rate, it kind of creates a ripple effect across the entire financial system.
That's right. Think of the economy as a big party. The Fed is the DJ, and the federal funds rate is the volume knob for the music. If the party is getting a little too wild and crazy, that's inflation. The Fed turns the volume down by raising the interest rates. This makes it more expensive for everyone to borrow money, which cools things down.
And so if the party's dying down and people are leaving in this scenario, that's a slowing economy or a recession. And the DJ turns the volume up to get people back out on the dance floor.
That's a perfect analogy. The Fed lowers interest rates, making it cheaper to borrow money, which encourages people and businesses to spend and invest, stimulating economy growth.
It's a great way to think about that. All right, so we have the cause. The Fed turns the interest rate knob up or down. But let's talk about the first effect, which is our savings. So, Daniel, when the Fed raises interest rates, when they raise them, what happens to the money in our savings account?
Well, this is actually good news for savers. When the Fed raises rates, the interest rate, or APY,
as we've talked about,
that goes up on your savings account. Banks are now earning more money on the money they lend out, so they can afford to pay you more for the money you deposit with them.
And what a difference, a huge difference that can make.
Yes.
So let's put some real numbers on that. A few years ago, in a low rate environment, you might have seen a high yield savings account with an APY of, say, 0.50%. So on a $10,000 balance, that's a $50 in interest over a year.
Right. But now, after the Fed has raised rates, it's not uncommon to see APYs of 4 or even higher. On that same $10,000 balance, a 4% APY earns you $400 in interest.
Way better.
That's a huge difference of $350 a year for doing nothing but having your money in the right place at the right time.
What a great analogy that is, too. But it's also important to know that this doesn't happen instantly or automatically for all accounts, does it?
No, that's a critical point. Some banks are quicker to pass on these higher interest rates to their customers than others, especially on standard savings accounts. High-yield savings accounts and online banks often react more quickly, and this is why in a rising rate environment, it's so important to occasionally shop around and make sure your savings are in an account with a competitive APY.
And then on the flip side of that, when the Fed starts lowering interest rates, we can expect the APY on our savings accounts to come down as well, right?
Correct. It's a double-edged sword. The same force that helps your savings grow can also slow it down. The key is to be aware of the environment we're in. If you hear news that the Fed is expected to start cutting rates, that might be a good time to consider locking in a higher rate with a long-term certificate of deposit before those rates start to fall. Hey everyone, it's Daniel Hill from First Century Bank. If you've enjoyed listening to Making Sense of Your Sense, and you found our tips helpful for your financial journey, I want to ask you a quick favor. Please take a moment right now to hit that subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast app. It's the best way to make sure you never miss an episode, and it helps other people in our community find the show. We also really want to hear from you. Do you have a question we haven't answered yet, or just want to let us know what you think of the podcast? If you're listening on Spotify, you can leave us a comment directly on the episode page, or you can always send us an email at podcast@fcbtn.com. We're building this show for you, and your feedback helps us make it even better. Thanks so much for listening and for being part of this journey with us. Now, let's kind of switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the other side of this coin, and that's debt. Shannon, how do Fed rates changes affect our credit cards?
Credit cards. So this is where it hits people's budgets the most directly, especially with credit cards. Nearly all credit cards have a variable rate. Again, variable means a floating rate, so it moves up and down. So if you look at the fine print in your cardholder agreement, you'll see the interest rate is defined as the prime rate plus a margin of, say, 15%.
And that prime rate is directly tied to the federal funds rate, right?
That's right. It is. And so the prime rate typically moves in lockstep with the Fed. So when the Fed announces a quarter point, a 0.25% rate hike, you can expect the prime rate to go up by a quarter point almost immediately.
Wow.
Almost immediately. And that means the APR on your credit card will also go up by a quarter point within a billing cycle or two at the most.
So let's put some real numbers on that. Say you have a $5,000 balance on a credit card. If your APR goes from 18% to 22% over a period of Fed rate hikes, your annual interest cost jumps from $900 to $1,100. That's an extra $200 a year, or about $17 a month, for doing nothing at all.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not the best. So it's a huge deal. And it's why carrying a credit card balance becomes so much more dangerous in a raising rate environment. The same thing applies to other variable rate loans, like a home equity line of credit, or HELOC for short. Their rates are also tied to the prime rate. So as the Fed raises rates, the cost of borrowing goes up.
What about the bigger fixed rate loans like mortgages and auto loans?
So fixed rates are a little different and a common point of confusion. The interest rates on new mortgages and auto loans are not directly set by the Fed. However, they are heavily influenced by the Fed's actions and its outlook on the economy. So when the Fed is raising rates and fighting inflation, it generally pushes the rates for a new long-term loans higher as well.
But, and this is the most important part for current homeowners, if you already have a fixed rate mortgage, you're safe, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of a fixed rate loan. If you locked in a 3% mortgage rate a few years ago, it's going to stay at 3% for the full 30 years, no matter what the Fed does. That's why the Fed's actions are most relevant when you are actively shopping for a new loan.
Wow, this has been just a wonderful discussion on a very complex topic. And now it's time to build on that understanding with this week's actionable tip.
So your action item for this week is the Jargon Buster. The goal is to build your confidence by taking control of one of these complex terms.
Here's how it works. The next time you see a financial headline with the term that feels intimidating, it could be Fed funds rate inflation, quantitative easing, or CPI. Don't just gloss over it.
That's right. Don't gloss over it at all. Instead, take 2 minutes. That's all it needs. 2 minutes to look it up, find the definition from a reputable source. But here's the key part. Don't just read it. Your challenge is to try to explain it in your own simple words, whether out loud to yourself or a friend or your family.
Yeah, become your own podcast host.
That's right.
That act of translating the jargon into plain English is what makes the knowledge stick. It moves from you being a passive listener to an active, informed participant.
And I think that's what matters. It's a small habit that over time will completely demystify the world of finance and empower you in conversations with financial professionals. Don't be intimidated by big words.
Exactly. Shanna, this is such a great conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll be back next week to tackle another big headline, and that is inflation. We'll explain what it is and how it impacts your family budget.
And until then, I'm Shanna Browning.
And I'm Daniel Hill. Thanks for making us a part of your week. And don't forget to send us your questions at podcast@scbtn.com. And subscribe wherever you listen, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'd love to have you following us.